Safety culture has ruined construction. Now, don't get me wrong here, okay? I want everybody to go home to their family, to their dog, to their Star Wars toy collection, whatever it is. I want people to work safe and go home safe. But safety culture on the job site has gotten way out of control. What began as workplace safety enforced by OSHA has become like performative safety theater that just kills morale. And the worst part is, it's really not even about keeping workers safe. It's about money. I mean, shocker, I know. There's actually a term for all the binders, the worksheets, the weird like safety rituals that you have to go through. It's called safety clutter. This is the accumulation of paperwork and activities that may look good on paper, but they don't actually contribute to a safer work environment at all. This whole dog and pony show makes workers cynical. You know, we go to the orientation, we sign the paper, we slap the sticker on our hard hat, all so we could just get to work and get paid. That's what we're there for. Nobody wants to get hurt or like cause an unsafe situation, but we've all heard these things time and time again, so often that it basically becomes background noise. Worse yet is that most messages of safety are delivered by some fresh-faced youngster who, beneath a pristine white hard hat and clean vest, is telling you to put on your safety glasses for the third time. I have my own issues with safety officers, all right? But my own experiences with safety guys aside, the construction industry as a whole has really worshipped something called TRIR for decades now. This is known as the total recordable incident rate. And basically what this is the number of OSHA recordable incidents multiplied by 200,000, which is basically 100 people working for 40 hours a week times 50 weeks, divided by the total hours worked. And I understand that we need to have a common yardstick to measure things by, but what this does is it makes people manage that number, not safety at all. It's about kind of appearances, not actual reality. Because TRIR completely ignores things like, I don't know, severity of incidents, and can also really swing wildly with low hour counts with like small shops. A guy way smarter than me, look up his name, it's Matthew something. He wrote a peer-reviewed paper all about how TRIR is basically just a useless metric to use and should be thrown aside. Now the issue is when companies chase a number rather than actual safety, what ends up happening is underreporting of incidents. And they can fudge the paperwork, kind of cook the book, so to speak, to make it look like they're doing better than they actually are. I have a story about this a long time ago. I started in residential, and so we did a lot of houses pre-2008 when the housing market collapsed. And I was working on a job. There was a whole bunch of people on the outside. They were putting up siding and painting trim and doing whatever. One of the guys fell off a ladder from the second floor onto the brick entryway. I was the first person to find him. I heard the noise. I was on the first floor. I went outside and I saw him laying there. It was the weirdest thing because I had never called 911 before, but with a smartphone, it goes into like tracing mode or something. So I called in the incident. They said they were going to send somebody, and then it said that it was tracking my phone, which was kind of wild. Anyway, nobody was wearing fall protection. They got there and they took this guy away. Shortly after, and I mean like an hour after that, the owner of the company shows up with brand new, fresh fall protection gear for everybody, harnesses, lanyards, the whole bit, and told everybody to put it on and to say that that guy was wearing it as well. So that is exactly what happens with this underreporting. Now, anytime something just doesn't make sense, it helps to start at the money. Workers' comp premiums hinge on something called a mod rate. You might have heard this before. It stands for the experience modification rate. Now, a mod rate of 1.0 is considered industry average. So most companies want to come in below that because what it does is it cuts down on your insurance premiums and also qualifies you for more work. If you have a high mod rate, sometimes you'll be completely excluded from working on certain projects, kind of just because they see you as a liability. So you can see how even just appearing safer has a real effect on a company's bottom line. Lower mod rate equals more work equals lower insurance premiums, all kind of based on self-reporting. On some projects, you'll see something called an OCIP or a CCIP, which is basically centralizing the insurance underneath the GC or the owner. And if you've ever been on one of these jobs, it's a nightmare. I mean, these jobs are absolutely terrible. They rule with an iron fist when it comes to safety. It's more like a safety sheriff than a safety officer. Now, these insurance policies usually come with blanket rules and stuff that have to apply to every single contractor. regardless of the task that they might be doing. I remember getting a toolbox talk about chainsaw safety in a building as an electrician. Now, usually we don't use chainsaws, and you know what, word to the wise, if you see an electrician walking through a building with a chainsaw, it might be in your best interest to just leave that building. On these jobs, usually it's not framed as keep the worker safe, it's protect the bottom line, make the spreadsheet look good. If you want to be miserable, get on a poorly managed CCIP or OCIP operation. Now, the reason not just me, but most people have a bad feeling about safety, not the actual thing, like keeping safe and going home to your family, but safety culture in general, is because we know it's insincere. We're being told what to do and how by people who have never done it so they can protect the bottom line of the company that they work for and protect revenue. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't think that companies want to see their workers hurt either. I mean, that makes no sense. But for sure, the gas in the fire is not worker safety. It's liability and financial bottom line. Now, I've said this before, but it certainly bears repeating. Some of the smartest men and women that I've ever met in my entire life have been dirty, rotten construction workers, blue-collar people whose wits are razor sharp and they really do live by them. They're usually very astute, very perceptive, especially when it comes to telling when something or someone is completely full of shit. And when it comes to safety, they know right off the bat, I have to go through these motions so I can get back to work. Morale really suffers when crews are forced through like safety performances and these things that don't actually have an effect on their day-to-day. Now, if we're doing like a critical pick, or we're gonna work on some live stuff, or maybe hot work, something where there's an actual danger that is clear and present, I'm all ears. How can we all stay safe? But box checking and going through things that just don't apply and just having to listen to somebody and your eyes are glazing over, those are the kind of things that kill morale. Pre-task planning is a good example. Now, when it's done right, it's a very brief, concise, to the point, and effective measure. But when it's done poorly, it just becomes a box to check on a paper because somebody in the office needs today's date and a bunch of signatures on it. I'll give you yet another example of safety overreach from my own experience. Now, I do a whole bunch of videos about keeping warm on the job and being prepared and the best gear, blah, blah, blah. Now, OSHA's rule regarding hard hats is aimed at maintaining performance of electrical class, not banning anything warm. The standard interpretation says that warm caps can be worn underneath your hard hat as long as they don't interfere with fit, visibility, or like conductivity or something like that. However, still, I've been on jobs where they tell you you cannot wear anything beneath your hard hat at all. Now, as a guy with not a whole lot of hair up here, I get cold real quick. So I've been on jobs where I've been freezing, but I'm safe. Now, if paperwork were the solution in safety theater, we would see fewer incidents, and we don't. Recent CPWR data shows that Hispanic construction fatalities rose sharply from 2011 to 2022. And that should really snap us back into reality. Measure and manage the stuff that actually kills and maims, but not the papers and the forms. Modern day safety culture takes the onus away from the people who are actually doing the work. And often this infantilizing of the concept makes people way more complacent because you think to yourself, well, I mean, they've gone through all this stuff. I guess everything's safe. I could just go ahead and do my work. Instead, if you were taught by your peers or by your own wits or whatever, you could develop those things. You'd say, you know what? Maybe I should put a guard on that tool. Maybe I shouldn't straddle this thing here. Maybe I shouldn't sit on the top of my A-frame ladder because I know what happens. Now, I don't like giving problems without proposing a solution. And I think that there is a way to do safety properly. First, they gotta cut the clutter. The clutter is just way too much. I don't need to know about a chemical that can burn me that is actually 500 miles away and will never be on this job site. There's no purpose. Second, they have to shift the metrics to what actually matters. TRIR that debate's over. It's a useless metric. Focus on the things that are immediate hazards that actually affect the people in the job that they're doing. And I get that they have to keep the legally required stuff. There's a certain amount of compliance that I'm sure you just have to do. But anything outside of that should really just be applicable to the job and keeping the worker safe, not performative. And then they have to reframe the PTPs and toolbox talks, not as a worksheet that everybody has to fill out and then sign at the end, because I've given these talks before, and I've seen the guys' eyes glaze over as they just wait for me to stop making noise so that they can go to work. The better way, in my opinion, is to open it up and have a conversation about it. Because if the guy working next to you has a story about why you should do a particular thing so you don't get hurt, that's gonna land a lot harder than just reading it off a worksheet. Look, a lot of us are in construction because we didn't like schoolwork. Please don't give me another worksheet to fill out. And finally, more companies have to take morale seriously and treat it almost like a safety metric. Because if morale is low, maybe it's not the worker's fault, maybe it's management's. Too much safety crap leads to exhaustion and indifference, but a supervisor who actually listens to you, adapts plans based on different information, and actually proposes good ideas to keep yourself safe rather than just going through the motions and box checking, that improves morale because you know that the guy who's watching over you actually has your best interest in mind, not just he's done all of his paperwork for the day. As workers, we didn't sign up to act out safety. We signed up to do our work responsibly, control risk, and go home so we can get paid. But right now, it seems like vanity metrics and insurance premiums drive safety culture. Our job is dangerous enough as is. Focus on the stuff that actually helps the men and women go home safely and in one piece. The focus needs to be on that, not fluffing up some numbers on a spreadsheet to impress an insurance company. Now, as I mentioned, I'm not against safety in general, and you know what? I'm not in my normal studio setting because it felt like this was like a garage thought, and I figured, you know what, instead of going upstairs and just doing this I'm gonna bring my camera down here and talk about this. But these are the kind of things that I think about sometimes, and after 20 plus years in construction, I've seen this really get out of control. So sometimes being able to talk it out and responding and seeing the comments and the conversation that happens down there helps me realize that maybe I'm not crazy. And sometimes it points out things from different regions and different places that people work that can really help kind of illuminate things for me. So think of this almost as me putting down my thoughts and asking you for yours. So what do you see on your job? Has safety gotten way out of control? For me, it seems like the bigger the contractor, the crazier the safety stuff is. And I'm not a fan. I kind of want to get off this ride, because and at what point are we just gonna be wearing suits of armor and not being able to use an actual ladder? I don't know. It just takes all the responsibility off of us as professionals. And I think when you do that and you kind of make it so safety is somebody else's job and not yours, it actually becomes more dangerous. Mike Rowe talks about this with his whole safety third concept, and I think that's a good one. And it's really just about your safety is your responsibility. I think more people need to start treating it as such and stop being babied by some overreaching, burdensome safety culture.